Let's learn Parshat Vayeshev with our commentator of the year, with Rashi. And famous Torah portion for the fact that it begins describing Yaakov settling into the land of Canaan, into the land of ancient Israel. And all of a sudden we get news that these are the stories of Joseph. This is how the story of Yaakov's family unfolded, with Joseph as protagonist. Of course, Jacob remains an essential figure within the narrative. And in chapter 37 of Genesis, there are two verses that give away what might have been the cause of all the troubles. And that was, and the rabbis were not afraid to say it, the favoritism that Jacob showed to Joseph in front of all of his children. How did that come to expression? How did they see that their father loved him more? Because of a gift that he had received back in verse 3 of the Parsha, if I'm already thinking about verse 23. But in verse 3, it says, V'asalo ketonet pasim, that Jacob made for Joseph a woolen tunic. And we've had the tradition of translating that as a coat of many colors, most likely because of the Andrew Lloyd Webber play, The Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Of course, we learned in Midrash at the early part of this week at our Torah study, lunchtime on Monday, that said that it was made up of strips of different purple wools. So you can imagine this kind of monochromatic, multi-purple color tunic that Joseph had. And the Rashi on that spot, when we are first introduced to this in verse 3 of chapter 37, says, Lashon Kli Milat. It means a garment of fine wool. Como karpas utchelet. It's like karpas and turquoise wool. That is ketonet apasim, and like the fine woolen tunic. And all these are quotes from either the book of Esther or from the book of Shmuel, from Samuel. Midrash Agadah, Rashi now adds, beyond defining the word, I'll tell you an agadic angle here, a midrashic angle. Pasim is potentially read as an acronym. Take each letter, were clued into how this tunic played a role in all of the troubles that befell Yosef. Shem Tsarotav, that Pasim clues us into Pei Potiphar, Samech Socharim, the merchants, Yud, the Yishmaelim, the Ishmaelites, and the Mem, the Midyanim, the Midianites, all involved at that fateful moment when the brothers decide to sell him down to Egypt. Now, if I turn to verse 23 and I read that verse along with the Rashi over there, I get a real sense of Rashi's understanding of this tunic, this woolen tunic. Verse 23 describes the moment where they strip Joseph of that coat. Vayafshitu et Yosef et kutonto et ketonet hapasim asher alav. They strip Joseph of his tunic, that fine woolen tunic, that one of pasim that was on him. And Rashi will say it, ketonet hapasim, because you didn't need to mention it was that same ketonet hapasim from verse 3. But Rashi says, in addition to just saying they ripped off his tunic, Davka, that tunic, specifically that one, because this was the one they realized and recognized as that extra coat, that extra something that their father Jacob had given to Joseph because of his favoritism. He shehosif lo aviv, yoter al echav. This was the extra one that his father had given him over and above his brothers. So it seems like everybody was provided for, except that Joseph was given something extra. Rashi clues us into his midrashic understandings without even quoting the midrash from Exodus Rabbah that we can sense echoing in the background as Rashi wrote this commentary here in Genesis. The midrash in Exodus Rabbah, in section 44, says that at 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks as a young helper, a na'ar. He was 17 years old. Why call him young? Why call him a na'ar? Rather, young here means that he acted foolishly. He would make up his eyes, adorn his hair, walk in strange clothing. What bad reports did he bring? Remember that Joseph brought evil or bad reports to their father. He would suspect them of eating limbs from living animals and tell their father that they were lusting after native women, even if they weren't. He was punished for these false reports. Now, Reish Lakish says, in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and here is where we see that it's evident that the sages concluded that Jacob had acted wrongly, and they had no problem finding fault with the action of biblical figures. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says a parent should not treat one child better than the other. For it was the coat of many colors, or it was this woolen tunic of many royal purple stripes that caused Joseph's brothers to hate him so. And so in digging deep, and digging deeply in terms of Jacob's parenting, there is a principle brought forward in terms of how the actions of our avot, the actions of our forefathers, come to teach us how to be better people, in this case, better parents. And that is, we should not violate that principle of equity within the family. It doesn't mean that everyone has to have exactly the same item, but it does mean that you have to have a certain baseline, and that one can perceive more of a share than another. Now, this, of course, gets into a larger issue within the biblical era of firstborn children having a double portion, of differences within the schematics of inheritance within families. And we know today that, in fact, those are some of the greatest challenges in the blessed reality that we have wealth to pass along to our children. Parents have to make incredibly hard decisions sometimes as to what to pass along. And is it right within the context of any one given family to present this much to one and that much to another, or should there be this overarching value in the calculus, at least, that says you could create the kind of conflict and tension that Joseph and his brothers experienced if we're not careful with thinking about how we treat the entire family, about how we treat the children, with some equity in the equation. This is a refreshing set of Rashis, as the Midrash is, to say that sometimes it is for the character flaws of our ancestors being displayed so openly that we can reflect on our own lives and learn better ways of living in the context of family, in the context of community, and in relationship to and with our God. Shabbat Shalom.